Hi, this is Tankenberg News with my folks Sebastian Ortiz, Oscar, and myself, Quint. I'm a good guy, a libertarian, and make a video with Sebastian Ortiz interviewing Cherry Baudet. Me, myself, handled the camera. Could you guys introduce yourself?
Yes. Well, yes, I'm Oscar Petty, and I'm one of the good guys. I am Sebastian Ortiz, and I am one of the good guys. And today we're going to be talking about precisely that, the goodness that makes us good. Yeah. Now, you had some things that you wanted to talk about. We were going to talk about it in English and in Dutch. So obviously, we are based in the Netherlands. We are very based in the Netherlands. And that means that we will be going back and forward between Dutch and English. Now, Quint, you wanted to talk about this idea of truth and free speech as a libertarian principle. Is it really a libertarian principle? This is a very contentious topic. So please go ahead.
Yeah, we had a phone call, and I asked you, Sebastian, what do you think? Is free speech or vrijheid van meningsuiting a libertarian principle? And you said, okay, Quint, we can have the discussion on the phone, but we also can have a call where everyone can enjoy. So I want to repeat the question: is it a libertarian principle, and what are your thoughts about it?
I would say no, it is not a libertarian principle. Freedom of speech is a typically post-French Revolution kind of liberal right, and it is not a libertarian principle for the following reasons. It is completely redundant. So in a society with a completely private property and respect for private property, freedom of speech is redundant for several reasons. The whole idea of freedom of speech is statist, and it's a part of liberal statism, and has nothing to do with real rights. Of course, you can, as a libertarian and in the libertarian order, say what you want where it is allowed. So it is allowed in your own house. You can say what you want. If there is a certain platform that allows freedom of speech, you are allowed to have your opinion there as well. But it also implies that where it is not allowed, you can't have freedom of speech. So, for example, if I invite you to my place, to my little ground, my farm, or my house, and I forbid you to talk about certain topics, you have to respect the owner. So there is no freedom of speech. Freedom of speech is, of course, a negative right, but in a libertarian order, that typical negative right makes no sense because you have already ownership of your body and your physical goods. So there is no reason to have freedom of speech. That's my position. Now, of course, I couldn't be more completely in an opposite interpretation of things and be completely against everything that Oscar said, which is great because, where there are two Jews, there are three opinions. Where there are two lawyers, there are four opinions. Where two libertarians, there are about six opinions. And so this is a contentious topic, and this is why I thought it would be great for us good guys to come together and have a discussion about it. Now, of course, I understand the theory and the fundamental principle of law behind what Oscar has described. My opinion, however, is one of war against the world in a libertarian lifetime. I am a libertarian in the currently existing statist world, or just in reality. I am a libertarian.
I am not beginning from the standpoint of already being in a free society. And I am confronted with political enemies of freedom, that is, people who are aggressionists, who justify publicly aggression, and who want to enforce aggression. And in that context, I have to make compromises and accept trade offs and opportunity costs in terms of even the rhetoric, the language that I use to persuade others to stop supporting aggression either financially or actively. And I thought it would be a great idea to talk about this with Oscar because I had an intuition of what he may say.
Well, I can elaborate on it. Of course, there's a difference between the current situation with states and your engagement with freedom of speech or freedom of speech in the libertarian order. In the libertarian order, it will be redundant, but in the current situation, I would say freedom of speech is of very high importance because freedom of speech also means a discussion about ideas, and that also means that the weaker ideas can be attacked and the stronger ideas can win. And that possibility is completely gone if you don't have freedom of speech in a country. So there are actually three things that are important. Freedom of speech as such in a libertarian order, freedom of speech in a statist order, and the importance from freedom of speech for the pursuit of truth and for the better ideas winning.
By the way, this is exactly what I told you on the phone yesterday, which is it all depends on whether you have a commitment to truth. Because under the current situation, first of all, let me say three different things. We live under statism. There has not been formally and officially anti-statist without taxation and regulation, libertarian non-aggression principle and private property rights society or country in history yet. So that remains a counterfactual or a hypothetical. Secondly, we have lived the most extreme form of censorship that the world had seen during the years 2020 through 2022 with fact checkers, with bots that would censorship, would exercise censorship, and that would flag your channels and your comments on YouTube as against community guidelines, etc.
And the European Union officials threatening Elon Musk. That's also one of the things. And there are even now people who want a coordinated action of Canada, the UK, Australia, and the European Union against Elon Musk and X to repress the freedom of expression.
And the case of Elon Musk and X is important because during the years 2020 through 2022, Twitter, X, was very censorious. When Elon Musk bought Twitter, then there was a relaxation. But as you mentioned, there are legal instruments, there are laws and regulations and treaties here in the European Union that curtail and prevent the free discussion of ideas. Now, if you have a commitment to truth, then it is very dangerous, even in a free society. And that's where the essay that you have read and you referred to, the debate on property and freedom, where they conflict with Walter Block and Frank van Doen, who I personally know, leads me to my position. My position is that, of course, people complain that I tend to make everything theological, that I tend to make everything about religion and faith. But in the largest part of our history, of the 2,000 years of Greco-Roman Judeo-Christian society, there was an idea of truth that had multiple aspects. You have mechanical truth, cause and effect. Then you have ethical truth. Ethical truth is you should do what is good and oppose what is evil. Then you have historical truth, which is important in legal cases, to have witnesses and documents and records of what actually happened and in history. And so if you have a commitment to truth in general, it can be dangerous if you have someone who is like the owner of the walled city or the castle saying, you cannot talk about alternative medications and treatments to COVID in my property. And you cannot communicate with other people who want to discuss that on the internet. This, in effect, is the same as the situation in North Korea with the internet and communication of ideas.
Yeah, and I would have something to say about that. That there are two things. For example, also the university had what originally a religious idea of Catholics to know the truth. For example, in the West, they knew the importance of truth because God has his laws, and therefore the study of nature is an important thing, and therefore there is a university and also academic freedom. And in academia, there was more possible than in real society. Also, to come to the not to come conclusion, but always having a continuous debate about truth and about the matter. And if you suppress this, you're weakening yourself and you're weakening your kingdom, or you're weakening your university, because also the academic freedom is suppressed in the last decades. And which means that people who have studied IQ are declared persona non grata because they come to very unegalitarian conclusions. And this is a very big danger, I would say.
Yeah, this is what happened with Jordan Peterson. Jordan Peterson was a professor in university. University, as you say, comes from this idea of the Catholicon. Catholicon, like the Catholic Church, means something that is considered to be true universally is considered to be true. So if you are a professor teaching something that you know, where the proof is in the pudding, like force equals mass times acceleration, if it's something that people can verify, scrutinize, study, and test for themselves, then something that is true here is true in some university far away from here as well. But what has happened is that through regulations, through the legislation of the state, the attack on the discussion of ideas and on free speech as a legal instrument that was the result of the French Revolution and the American Revolution, for example, in the First Amendment, has had an effect that Jordan Peterson was required to use transgender pronouns legally in the faculty of the university where he worked, and because it was against his common knowledge, his common sense, his conscience, conscientia.
The infamous Bill 16 wasn't.
Yes, because of this, his career was endangered and risk ruining. And he only became more famous in the area of society, the internet, where the free flow of information and the free discussion of ideas still remains untouched, which is the internet. But in the faculty, he was being warned that what he was doing was illegal because there were regulations that required him. There was a verplicht, there was a obligation for him to refer to students and so on by their preferred pronouns, which goes against the idea that there is a verifiable biological nature or gut-given gender that people are born with, and exceptions notwithstanding, people who have strange or unusual or extraordinary biological features, that you don't get to simply say, now you are legally forced to call me a dog, Quint. And if you don't comply, then I can sue you or accuse you according to the criminal law, and you have to pay a fine or meet consequences that that may mean you lose your job. And we saw this in many places throughout the world during the years 2020 through 2022. So, of course, the conclusion that Van Doen comes to is where there is a conflict between property and freedom, freedom must prevail. Where there is a conflict between property and truth, truth must prevail, because we don't live already in a perfect world or in a libertarian world. And so these legal instruments, like the First Amendment of the Constitution of the United States, are there so that the weak can speak out things that are historically, actively, and mechanically true against the policies of the powerful. Think of the very famous Elenco protocol of the alternative treatment of COVID with hydrochloroquine, etc., which of course was at the risk of every adult who would be willing to take an alternative treatment. This was being suppressed by the so-called fact checkers at the time. And so if people, adults who don't have the ability to overthrow the government or to veto the government and say, you may have passed a regulation, but it doesn't apply because it goes against my freedom, to those people, the truth and the communication thereof is of fundamental importance.
It's also very interesting that the same group who wants to suppress freedom of speech also said some things like the science is settled. The science is settled actually means that there can't be any discussion about these scientific facts, while science is actually trial and error all the time. So that the science is never settled. So it's very unscientific to say that science is settled. And of course, they don't believe in science. It's more like a kind of a shut up, fake argument.
Yeah, it's a dogmatism of this is the truth and you must obey and shut up. Lest you mislead someone from the truth. And in reality, even during the times of theology and theological disputes, there was this idea of there's always room for an open discussion of ideas and debate and reservations and opinions and further investigation, just like there may be an appeal before a higher court and the highest court for a case where the law is known by everyone, the lawyers, the defendant, the judge, but a discussion on the facts that took place, the historical facts, the events, and the principles that apply in interpreting the evidence, whether there is sufficient evidence or there is apparently contradictory evidence. All of this is crucial before you impose a punishment.
And can I go back to the original discussion where, Oscar, you made the distinction between three different situations?
Yeah.
You explained at first the situation in an anarchist libertarian society.
Yeah.
And we ended our phone call, Sebastian, when I said, is there a real distinction? Because is it not so that you can only limit speech in your own property? So when a university or a state wants to limit your speech, that's impossible because they don't have any legal property from an anarchist perspective, so they can't limit it.
That's the reason why it is redundant in a libertarian order. And the idea itself is very statist, liberal, Enlightenment, 18th century French Revolution like.
And it doesn't mean that it should be repealed from the constitutions, etc. before this. If I may if I may take this question, I should say that the reason why these legal instruments should remain until at least the reform has taken place is because de facto, as a matter of fact, or in practice, the state as the sovereign presumes to be the legal owner of the entire territory. Also, this is the reason why in my book, Why Did I Kill and the End of State Law, co-written with Andre Ramirez Quiroz, I don't talk about libertarianism in the way that Rothbard or Hoppe talk about libertarianism. I don't talk about the ethics of liberty. I don't talk about the fundamental principle of what is lawful of Frank van Doen. I don't talk about the ultimate justification of the ethic of private property of Hoppe, where based on private property and the necessity for private property, on defense of libertarian conclusions, abolition of taxation, abolition of regulation follow. Instead, I talk about an ethics of force, and that is informed in retrospective by my study of law in Costa Rica, which is in no man's land, you're in the desert and another person is in the desert. The relations of physical force and the primacy, the fundamental important primacy of ethical goodness in relation to force must stand and prevail. And what I mean by this is simple. Imagine you are in the desert and I am in the desert. Neither of us owns the desert, but we both own our body. Our body is a movable physical object. We are responsible for our administration of our movable physical object. Now, if in the desert I say to you, I believe, and then I quote the Creed of the Apostles, in Jesus Christ and God the Creator, and that He died under Pontius Pilate and resurrected, etc. The sound waves that I am emitting that are coming to your ears in no man's land do not entail a justification for you to use physical force against me. Only if I use physical force or a threat thereof against your body are you justified in responding with physical force. But if you say, no, you got it wrong. My guy was the prophet. He took dictation from God himself. And you must accept this idea, or I will impose it to you by force, so you must obey and submit. Here, the libertarian ethics of force still applies. In no man's land, where all you own is your own body, you don't have the right to impose your opinion or your theological interpretation of history on me. I remain free to defend myself from you initiating force against me, just like you also remain free to defend yourself if I initiate force against you. So what I'm saying is that before we have abolished all taxation and regulation, or aggressive enforcement, as I call it, this idea of I am free to use my communications, my channels of communication, whether it's the air that is in between us, to freely speak about ideas that you may think are wrong, remains. Force against force, but force against ideas, force against arguments, force against different perspectives and opinions, very dangerous, especially if the state has not yet been abolished.
Yeah, we see that also in, for example, the UK. In the UK, people get arrested for comments they have made on the internet. And this was not the case 10 years ago or 20 years ago. So even in European countries, they don't respect freedom of speech anymore. It's a very dangerous development.
There is no freedom of speech. There is no de jure, formalized, as a legal right, constitutional freedom of speech in the United Kingdom, not in the way of the First Amendment of the United States. And this is not inconsequential. Think of 3D printed weapons, firearms that are made out of plastic with a 3D printer. In the United States, in the year 2013, Cody Wilson 3D printed a gun, the first gun, the Liberator. Now, of course, the federal government of the United States, which includes a lot of anti-gun people from the Democratic and the Social Democratic side of politics, did not like this. He was a law school dropout. So eventually, the government settled, and the case did not go to the Supreme Court. But his argument was very simple. They were trying to say that by putting the open source code of how you can 3D print your own gun on the internet, he was sharing it with the world, and also the world includes enemies of the United States, and therefore he was aiding enemies of the United States. There was a espionage type of regulation. His argument was very simple. If there can be no previous censorship in the United States because of the First Amendment, then computer code is a form of speech. And since the Second Amendment, the right to bear arms, is also part of the Constitution, you cannot censor speech relating to bearing arms. And that includes the computer code that gives you the blueprint to how to be able to 3D print your own guns. The government settled because they knew this was a losing battle. This could not have been legally done in the United Kingdom. And so it is very important that we look at the ethics of force, libertarianism, as a kind of transcendent order, meaning, yes, you discover what is just in terms of property, in terms of action. I talk about ethical human action. But remember that there's a hierarchy of things. We derive our understanding of what is ethical human action, action that does not initiate force against the body or things of other people, based on our understanding of the truth of people in general. People have bodies, people can attack each other, people can choose not to attack each other, people can have self-restraint, and people can defend themselves from attacks, self-defense. But there's a hierarchy. First comes truth, and from the truth comes understanding, and from understanding comes ethics, which is deciding what truly is good in terms of ethical action universally, so that then we can conclude going around attacking other people to get money from them, taxation, is not socially acceptable, it is not interpersonally acceptable, and it cannot be promoted as a good thing. The state,
not as in a universal thing. That's a whole.
Yes, the government simply makes an exception for themselves. They say, we are the sovereign, and in our exercise of political power, we reserve ourselves and only ourselves the right to tax everybody here and to tell everybody how to act by force here. If they don't comply, we will enforce it. This, at least we can, informed by good understanding, conclude is evil. That if everybody did that all the time, society would be chaos.
There will be no society.
Yeah.
If that's also the reason why the idea of property is theft, which is a contradiction in terms, is such a ridiculous quotation.
I should say that is a quote by Pierre-Joseph Proudhon. The idea was...
Yeah, well, I think his idea was to make it ironic, wasn't it?
No, he was saying that when the state enforces private property, in terms of defending private property and of owners, or it recognizes the legal right of owners to defend their private property, there is violence. And here, I also mentioned this in my book, which is there's a difference between aggression and violence. Violence is force that is applied against the will of the person onto whom it is applied. But that doesn't necessarily mean that that violence is unethical. A woman may use force against the will of a guy who's trying to rape her, putting a knife to her throat, even deadly violence. And this is not an illegitimate or unethical use of physical force, interpersonal physical force. Yes, it is violence because the other guy doesn't agree with her self-defense. He doesn't agree not only in speech and in thought, he disagrees in practice. He's trying to really rape her with a knife put to her throat, and she is really disagreeing in practice, trying to defend herself, even using lethal force. But she commits no unethical, no evil human action in imposing her will against his will, because he is initiating force against her consent.
I would even so it's not only not unethical, but even a good force. It is a good force to eliminate an aggressor.
No,
That's a force. That's a force for good. If you eliminate an aggressor, that is a good action.
not only that. Now there's a lot of controversy about Trump, who is a statist, who is not a libertarian, who at least liberated one libertarian, Ruth Albrecht, because of Maduro, because of kidnapping so-called Nicolas Maduro. You have to understand that in the real world, which is not the world of libertarian theory, the statist that does something good, like taking away Maduro, which has been speculated, maybe even Maduro asked to be saved from the fate of someone like Ceausescu in Romania. When that happens, is where you have to admit reality for what it is, truth, the historical truth of events that take place, and admit that it is in situations of war, under attack, that the enemy of your enemy does no evil by opposing your enemy. It is when the statist does something relatively less evil that the broken clock is giving the time right twice a day. If the United States invaded Cuba or North Korea and instituted a free market where there's ownership by the local Cubans and free commerce internally and externally with the world, between Cubans and the world, between Cubans and themselves, between Koreans and themselves, between Koreans and the world, this, against international law, against the sovereignty of nations that are supposed to be in an anarchy among peers, would nevertheless be improvement. And this is the thing that libertarians fail to see. Where things go into the direction of freedom, of more freedom, there is improvement. Where things go closer in the direction of the non-aggression principle, there is more freedom and there is therefore improvement. But you cannot be a purist, because if you are a purist, then such things would be completely unacceptable. Then Trump has simply kidnapped Nicolas Maduro and therefore violated the non-aggression principle. This is ridiculous.
I would even say that libertarian purism implies no engagement whatsoever, not taking a position in the real world and in real world events. And that is actually very cowardice, but it also means that you don't fight for freedom. For example, the election of Milei, the real world alternative is Sergio Massa, which is basically a Keynesian social democrat, Peronist. That is the reality. So a lot of libertarians want to keep and treasure their purism and don't want to make dirty hands. But in the real world, it doesn't work like that. In the real world, you have bad governance and catastrophic governance. And in the real world, sometimes you have to choose for the bad over the catastrophic, for the moderately good over the bad, etc.
Yeah, this is complete, pure, total vanity. Idle vanity of vanity.
Moreover, speaking of Maduro, Maduro has ended the lives of approximately 100,000 people, 20,000 by bullets of the opposition, and the rest because of scarcity, because of starvation, because of lack of medicine, because of government policies.
Two things.
So he's a mass murderer, and he causes the death of people.
Yeah, two things. First of all, is you cannot just virtue signal that you're holier than thou while you live behind the walls of your monastery.
Say, oh, yeah, but Pinochet was not a Rothbardian. He was following the Chicago school. What a bad man! And he killed 3,000 communists. What a very bad man! Yeah, but yeah, the alternative was the communist revolution, with by far more victims you can predict.
There are two things.
What kind of measurements do you use to
Wait,
prove
let
those
me say.
things?
One more moment. What?
What kind of measurements do you use to prove those things? Because measure Trump with Maduro, it or any American United States president with Maduro, that's like really hard, right?
No, well, in the case of Maduro or a regime change in Venezuela, there is an alternative in Venezuela. That's exactly the reason why I am not against regime change. In the case of Libya with Gaddafi, it was another case, because in that particular case the alternative were slave driving Muslim fundamentalists. In the case of Syria, I'm also not very convinced about the good alternative. But in the cases of, for example, Chile in the early 70s and Maduro now, there are alternatives. There are alternatives that are less deadly and less harmful than the former ruler.
But guys, gentlemen, I wanted to say something. First one thing. This idea of I go behind the walls of my monastery and then I virtue signal, I tell the world how holier than thou I am, because choosing between the lesser of two evils is
also evil.
It's also evil. It's enabling that which you fight. And also, not only that, the path to hell is misleading and path with good intentions.
And Hayek is such a status economist.
This is a luxury opinion of someone who just wants to virtue signal and who is not facing life or death. It's pure.
Not mentioning Friedman, for example.
It's
horrible.
It's pure vanity.
Yeah.
And secondly, the second thing is, this has to be a matter of not only principle, but the actionability of principle. Because some leftists, some Marxist, Leninist, classical Marxists, who are nowadays occupying positions of power as social democrats, will take the data of Pol Pot, of Mao, of Stalin deaths, and say these are fake news, these are fake numbers. The 20,000 that you mentioned by Maduro, this is just the opposition of capitalism.
The 20,000 by Maduro was, by the way, United Nations numbers.
Yeah, so these are not
Mind you,
these are not cranky old libertarians making claims. This is data from the state of states themselves.
Yeah.
But this is not seeing that it's life or death. And this too is just vanity. Because when you say better those 3,000 or so deaths of Pinochet or however many deaths of Franco to the alternative, which would have been to make Chile like Cuba, or like Cambodia, or Spain.
No. I can say something about how you predict it. You can predict it. You can predict beforehand that a Marxist-Leninist dictatorship leads to more dead people than a dictatorship of a pragmatic general. For the following reasons. If you implement socialism in the country, it leads to scarcity. Easy as that. Also for several reasons. The suboptimal allocation of scarce resources, that there is no market, that they have a very bad incentive structure, and also the track record of it. If you, after the USSR and Maoist China and Pol Pot Cambodia and Mengistu Ethiopia you want to establish a Marxist-Leninist state, you know beforehand that it will be a bloody, mass murderous, deadly state. And you also grant a general the benefit of the doubt.
Now, I do have to say something here. And that is that in the case of Franco and Pinochet, they were both Catholics. And you may think, oh, this is completely inconsequential. It's not inconsequential if you consider the fact that in principle, the Marxist, classical Marxist-Leninists, being atheists, believe that you're just a physical body and there's no sanctity of life, and that abortion is birth control, etc., etc.
Yeah, and the other thing about Marxist-Leninists, because there is no transcendence and there's no afterlife, there is a more urgency to do everything here on Earth. So that also feeds the revolution to do this here on Earth. And because they are in a way nihilists, it doesn't matter if you kill, because they have no souls anyway, and life has no meaning anyway. The only raison d'être the communists have is their bloody world revolution.
Yeah, it's political expediency, and you're just a human resource. So get on with it. And this is why I say the other thing is that I, as a lawyer, know that if you take this attitude, you enable this attitude of saying, of applying the economic analysis and statistics to make it about numbers. As a lawyer, you know what they're going to do rhetorically. They are going to say you're lying. They're going to say your data is false, you're exaggerating, you're lying. And they'll do that while lying themselves. I am an essentialist dogmatist or a dogmatic essentialist. I believe in principles. I believe in a transcendent ethical order that says you cannot initiate force, and this has to be argued in principle. But in the battle of ideas in the real world, you don't want to enable your opponent to use rhetorical devices, which is like a lawyer does in a criminal court case. In a criminal court case, someone is accused of having committed an act of aggression. And what does the defendant, the attorney, do? What does the guy defending, the guy who's accused of having committed an act of aggression do? He puts the evidence that is presented of the accusation into question, because the principle is where there is ambiguity or contradictory statements and witnesses and accounts on evidence, then prevention and prudence says it's better not to impose the penalty. So you don't want to give them the opportunity of saying this is about data, statistics, and numbers, like the person accused will say, well, that's just a lie. No. You want to say, look, I know you are for imposing things against innocent people by force for the sake of political expediency and your own plans. I'm against that.
You could even put it to the whole railway dilemma, to put it in perspective of, let's say, 3 people die if you throw a handle left, and 100 people die if you do it on the right. And you also look which 3 people die and which 100 people die. 100 innocent people die, or 3 people die and 2 of them are not innocent at all, but are terrorists. In that particular case, you will choose for that only 3 people die. And of course you can say, yeah, but I don't want to be a part of this. I don't want to support someone who kills 3 people. Yeah, you in the real world, at a certain point, it is not possible anymore, and it's like claiming that you are an angel. It's in the real world, it's really a struggle. There's constant a struggle and constant fight, and constantly there is a cultural war. You have to fight it.
Going back to the first vanity, the hiding yourself between the walls of your monastery and just floating in a cloud of farts, and everybody likes their own farts better than those of other people. But of course, if you make libertarian theory into a fart, then you're not doing the communication of what is right and what is true and what is just as a form of political activism and education of society. What you're doing is you're saying, no, the road to hell is paved by good intentions, and you're enabling evil. No, you are enabling evil because magnitudes matter.
Yeah, well, the interesting thing is,
As you mentioned,
and that is very ironic. Javier Milei gets a lot of criticism for doing things, for getting more freedom in Argentina, and he gets a criticism, and of course he makes a lot of mistakes, no doubt about it. But Ron Paul still is praised for having done absolutely nothing on a legal or a legislative level. And that's so very frustrating that they only want their purest ideas and reflection of their purest ideas, and while confronted with people who really get things done,
yep,
they are against it, and they even want to commit character assassination against those people.
Puritanism is of the passive. Puritanism is of people who are neither leading, following, or getting out of the way. Puritanism is people who have the luxury of complaining without having to solve any problem, and they do it because they have the luxury of complaining without solving any problem. If 3 people are going to die in order that 100 people don't die, and those 100 people include 50 of my family members, what do you think I'm going to choose in a country that is not fully developed, or that went from being developed into being a catastrophe like Cuba or North Korea? It's life or death. Trump has said that what he wants with the war stopping is he wants to have the fewer lives, stopping the loss of life in the Ukraine. He says this was Joe Biden's war, and there are lives that are being lost on both sides. That's what I want to stop. Now, of course, people who are Puritans, who think, oh, I am holier than thou, and I don't want to engage at all, who don't care about saving those 100 people, they are going to say, oh, of course, the devil misleads by giving you the lie that appears the most like the truth. But you realize that in the real world, you make profit by having an extra additional client over the competition, by having an extra additional unit of money, by selling an extra additional unit of goods and services. And therefore, this kind of self-defeating pessimism leads to nothing gets done. As you say, there are people who would praise Ron Paul for the nothing that he did, because at least he did no wrong.
Can I ask something with my freedom of speech?
Yes.
I think it's very obscene, and I distance myself from the gestures Juan Sebastian has made.
What do you mean by gestures? I was listing numbers.
Okay, I have number 3. How can we come back from those non-principle situation to a situation where anarchist or libertarian principles does lead?
Well, you also have to think about your end goal. And that's a very classic problem, because people get corrupt when they forget about the end goal. And you see this in politics all the time. And Hub Jongen, the father of libertarianism of the Low Countries, said to me that politics are like intestines, and that you become shit at the end. That of course is true. So people can be step in with a very idealistic mind into politics, and then become devils. The classical theme of Mephisto. And you see this, for example, with Guy Verhofstadt. Guy Verhofstadt was at first a kind of classical liberal with quite sane ideas. And right now, he is the most horrible advocate of a federal Europe. He is extremely statist. And that has occurred in just a couple of years. And actually, from the moment he was prime minister in Belgium, he all of a sudden had a taste of the power, and he forgot all about ideas of freedom.
But is he not?
This is of course a serious concern.
I want to say one thing.
But does he not use the same arguments as you guys did before? So I remember a quote of him saying that, okay, now we ignore the will of the people, but in the end they will give me a schouderklopje for it.
I want to say something. The word end. You cannot forget the end result you're pursuing.
I have to say something about it. He might say this, but he means a completely different idea. So he is already corrupted by the wrong ideas. So he is not working onto freedom. He has not freedom as end goal in mind. He is in this case teleologically completely off. He does not think about freedom. He thinks about the superstate. What I mean is that, for example, in the case of Millet, and of course there is also a danger that Millet gets corrupted as well, that even though he knows what he can do will not be perfect, that he still has in his mind the end goal of freedom and making Argentina in the most free country of the world. I think Millet, even though there is always a risk because we all are human beings, there's a less risk with Millet. I think he will realize what his end goal is.
This is something to do with the opportunity cost or the cost of an enterprise. When you say you have to remember the end result that you pursue, that means that you are consciously aware that you are communicating the ideas of the principles of not initiating force against others and others being free to defend themselves or others who are the victims of attacks, has as an end goal a political system of law where this is the law that cannot be contradicted. But you don't start from that end. That means that there are going to be costs, risks, dangers that you're going to have to actively face, and there are going to be trade-offs along the way. When you mentioned Millet is the first anarcho-capitalist president in the world. Now, the end goal is to have a political community that is a country where the only thing that is enforceable is defense of body and property against attacks. Now he has a substantial number of the seats of the Congress. I have written in my book of how to repeal the current state law into a constitution that has this peculiarity. But as you mentioned, the Puritanism of I rather do nothing because then I get my hands dirty and I rather do no evil, while criticizing those who wish the same end result as yourself and are doing something about it, leads either to paralysis or to damn me if I do and damn me if I don't, which means that those who are not already the strongest power, which is us, those who want freedom, will not prevail against those who have power. The moment that the libertarians in the world have the most power, and what is power? Really think about it. The statists are not giants who are like 3 meters tall and 1 ton heavy. They are also not, they don't have magical superpowers.
No, they're actually very ordinary officials.
Yes, all they have is the rhetoric to persuade people to obey them, and the people who obey them be armed and have higher technology. It's a matter of who has the most logistical capabilities of cooperation, coordination, and logistical collaboration.
I want to elaborate on that. That's also a very big contrast between the, let's say, the Schreibtisch intellectuals and the man of action. You don't have, if you have the best ideas and you have the best ethics, that doesn't mean that you have the power to implement those ideas. And that is what a lot of people don't realize. To implement those ideas, you need power. And to have power, you have to fight. And you have to make dirty hands. And you have to understand that you will make dirty hands if you play with power. And that is always the case.
As your legal counsel, I should make a caveat here that, of course, what we're advocating is not a revolutionary insurrection of terrorists.
No, absolutely not. But
persuading people to give support to the good guys so that they become the powers that repeal the bad laws, the aggressive enabling of enforcement of the old bad guys.
And of course, there is always in transition when the old order gets weakened bit by bit, and that's also the dirty hands that you make. For example, Javier Milei makes dirty hands by being a president that still has taxation and legislation power over people. And of course, he is still the president, the most powerful person of a criminal organization. So he makes dirty hands, no doubt about it. But it is transitionary.
But what I meant with making the transition is not in practical sense, but it's more like in principle sense. So like, how can you become trustworthy again? So first you make dirty hands, as you guys said, but then implementing libertarian ideas, then you expect from other people that they don't make dirty hands anymore, because you end up with anarchist libertarian ideas where we have those principles and we don't agree with physical force or
well, of course that's the case, and you need the best way to have a revolution is to stay in your principles. For example, Gandhi. I'm not a fan of Gandhi, but Gandhi was by principle against violence. I'm not, by the way. I'm for defensive violence, but he stayed that principle. And the lesser known aspect of the independence of India is that there were also people who were violent, and that had also an impact that led to the independence of the country. But this is an example of being principled and staying principled.
One of the things that I would say about this is the purpose of the libertarian idea being put into practice is not to keep me as an adult man morally good. No. The purpose of the libertarian idea in the mouth of those political activists who educate the public is to achieve a ceasefire where the libertarian idea is manifested in real human action. By ceasefire, I mean under the current regime, we, the majority, are in a Cold War by the initiation of the use of force of the government against everyone who they consider to be subordinate. What the libertarian movement goal is not to make sure that the libertarians stay true to their principles, but that the statists cease and desist from threatening people and jailing people to finance their activities, to repeal the written literature, the imperative literature, the literature that says this came out of the Houses of Congress, therefore the policeman can go enforce it on you. Well, in that case, let the libertarians be the ones in the Houses of Congress that repeal that literature and say, now the literature says that the police may not do that. And that is not about us staying perfectly libertarian.
Yeah, and then the other thing is you have to do, sometimes you have to do this step by step. You, in a lot of cases, you can't be an abolitionist because that will be directly the end of your power. So that's also, to my concern, a miscommunication between Hoppe and Javier Milei, because Hoppe said, well, if I would have been the president of Argentina, I would instantly ended the central bank. Well, Javier Milei knows first he does not have this power to do this on his own with a hostile parliament. That in the first place. In the second place, if he closes the central bank, there will be a lot of trouble, and you will not be re-elected, etc. So sometimes you have to do things gradually.
Not only that, most times in life, you have to do things that are not by your own rules. When you go to work, you don't do things by your own rules. When you're speaking to the police officer who told you to stop the car, you're not going by your own rules. If you want to change the rules to the effect that people don't initiate force against each other, you are being introduced into a tournament of poker where the rules may not be hold'em poker, and you say, well, but that's what I play. Well, you'll have to adapt to the rules of what people are playing if you want to change the tournament, if you want to win the pot and then have your own tournament.
Okay, but then I have a question.
Not about libertarianism, but can give an example of a transition. For example, Juan Carlos in Spain. He has he comes to power in 1975 when Spain is a dictatorship. Franco just has died, and he has practically the same dictatorial power as Franco, but as a king. And what he does is a transition to democracy, and that practically ends after 3 years. There is already a constitution. There have been elections in 1977. So there's the establishment of this democracy in a couple of years. And such a thing would have been possible as well for a libertarian who becomes a monarch and has dictatorial power, to have a transition towards libertarianism. But if someone functions in a democratic system as Milei, you can't do these things, and that also means that the transition has to be a lot larger. I think if he gets re-elected and he has a second term, and he can also build up one of his party members to get a new president, so that will become a second anarcho-capitalist president, that by the late 30s, Argentina might be the most free country in the world and the one of the most prosperous countries of the world. So it is possible, but because they all have to function in a democratic system, these things take time. That's also one of the reasons why has Dubai developed so rapidly, because they had a classical monarch with dictatorial powers, and in that particular case, your playing field is completely different than in a democracy.
Here, there's a paradox that you mentioned earlier, and I want to talk about it because it's important, which is, in a practical sense, of libertarians who want reality to run on libertarian principles, imagine a situation in which most people want social democracy, welfare state, pensions for the old, unemployment benefits, unemployment insurance, subsidies for the poor and single mothers, etc. And they want taxation and redistribution. Comes into power a dictator. He is a libertarian. Now, libertarianism means that the only rules that apply in the land are you cannot initiate force against other people, and if you do, other people can defend. The majority, all of the country, do not want this. This is too disruptive. This is too abrupt. I want my old age pension. I want my rent subsidies. I want my single mother subsidies. I want my disability pension. Most people are against, in opinion. They do not consent with the libertarian guy. Libertarian guy, against that, imposes by force the libertarian idea of freedom. What is the libertarian idea of freedom? Now there is no pensions, no subsidies for rent, no old age pensions. There is no national currency. You can save in gold or silver or crypto or whatever, but it is your responsibility to get a job. There's no minimum wage, and people don't want that. Only he rules because the generals and the police follow him and not the people. Now the question is this good or bad? And this is a paradox that is very important, because in the Declaration of Independence of the United States, it says that consent of the governed is the criterion by which we know whether there should be a revolution and overthrow power or not. Well, there was consent of the governed when the Nazis were elected, when Hitler was elected in 1933, before the Constitution modified the law so that the Jewish German citizens lost their rights. Same thing happened in Venezuela when Hugo Chavez was democratically elected, before he changed the constitution and expropriated the big transnational corporations that owned the oil business and the land where the oil business was taking place. So yes, it is possible that a libertarian, in all his power, knows better than what the people want. In that case, do we criticize him when he imposes freedom against the socialist will of the people? Well, I know this. I will not, for legal reasons, promote the libertarian dictator coming into power. For legal reasons. I'm not going to call to insurrection, terrorism, coup d'etat, etc. But if he did, would I applaud him? Well, I don't condone him. I don't condone him.
Don't water your garden when it's raining.
Yeah. Yeah. So do I condone violent dictatorship that overthrows and abolishes the democratic powers for prudence and legal reasons? I do not condone or support that. If historically it happens, will I applaud? Well, I know what I stand for.
Maybe this is a good moment to finish the Group Man talk.
Yeah, I think this is a good moment to to finish the good guys talk.
This is the first good guys talk with 2 screens. So, yeah.
Okay. Just to finish, remember, people, don't leave it to the YouTube algorithm. Spam your boss, your friends, your neighbors, your enemies. Get fired over this and speak to people on the streets about this. Don't be shy. Remember that in the cultural battle of ideas, we don't already have power, and it's a long way until we get there. So if you like and are a subscriber, remember, unless you hit the all notification button, you're not going to see us in your YouTube role. Remember,
become a subscriber.
yeah, become a subscriber, hit on the bell, and then tell people outside of YouTube, everywhere, not only on the internet, about this. Otherwise, you will not see us having any influence in the world until being a good guy and a libertarian is as popular and as well financed and paid for by society as it is to be a Hollywood star or a politician or an athlete. We are losing, and we have to behave like we're losing. Thank you.
Dank jullie wel.